Welcome back to my devlog series on Void Racer. This is video number 5, and we're going to be mostly talking about AI in this video. But first, I want to talk about a couple quick things that I added here and there, and these are just kind of random things that don't fit an overall theme, so I'll go through them pretty quickly. The first thing I did was add some brake lights for the car and some headlights. And I did add a little script in there that makes the brake lights come on when the car is braking, so that's pretty nice and very simple to implement. I also added a boost, and with that comes boost particles, and the particle system is very simple, probably one of the simplest ones you can do because it's really close to what the default settings are. When you create a VFX graph like this, they're just kind of shooting off in one direction. I changed it from the clock looking things to just a default particle, and then I bumped up the emission rate. And then I added some colors, but that was pretty much it. I just needed something that made it look like it was propelling the car, and I think it does that. And the boost script was really easy. It literally just adds a force in the backwards direction of the car. I did offset the force, so it applies the force at the back of the car. So like if you're in the air, it will start rotating your car based on how you're positioned. And that was just to make it feel a little more authentic and how it really would be, and also making it a little closer to Rocket League, which was one of the big inspirations for at least the controls in this game. So with all of this jumping and boosting around, it kind of promotes doing crazy things with your car, and then that allows you to get into pretty crazy situations and just weird situations where you can't really control your car. So I wanted to help out the player as much as possible. So I know that I needed a flip the car to get back up if it's upside down type of script, and a reset script if you just completely get into a horrible situation and need to completely reset. So the flip to get up script was kind of an interesting one, and I don't think that I completely nailed it, but it works out pretty good in most cases. It just basically freezes all of the rotations so no forces can be applied to the car, and then it gets a desired rotation, so it tries to figure out which way it should be pointing, and then it lerps between those positions. And this kind of forces it to shove its way around, so if it's on the track and upside down, it will just shove its way around back onto its feet. And the way that it looks is a little wonky, but I think it kind of works. And then I also used the orient part of that script to allow the player to orient the car back to a position that they should be kind of looking. So that way if they're doing some crazy flips, they can just hit a button and the car will sort of straighten itself back out, so you have a better chance of landing on the track the way you want to. And if you manage to get yourself too far away from the track, you can press it and it will look back at the track, so you can boost your way back that way. Like I said, it's not the smoothest thing in the world, but it works well enough for right now anyway. And the car reset script. So this one was a little more complicated, and I also had this in mind for the AI, which I will be talking about in a second. But I also just needed a way to get back on the track, because in a lot of my testing I end up falling off the track and then you just fall into infinity, and it's very hard to get back up and find where the track was if you're just trying to boost your way back up there. I also put up some boundaries with that reset script, and they're basically just cubes that are outside of the map, the track area. So if your car hits those, I basically just assume that you're too far away from the track and probably not headed in a good direction. So if you come into contact with those, it will just automatically reset you. And what it does is it finds the most recent node that you touched, which I will go into the nodes a bit more here in a second as well. And then resets you in that node, basically looking towards the next node. And it just basically cancels out all forces that were on your car. It cancels out any torque or anything that was on the wheels. It just tries to cancel all that, and then it moves your car back into the position and then drops you on the track. If I have some extra time at the end, I might try to make this look a little bit nicer and do some flashing, kind of like Mario Kart does when you get brought back by Lakitu. So all those things were just kind of quality of life improvements. I think that they were needed to make this a functioning racing game, because in any racing game you can always get your car upside down if you don't mean to. So there's just a couple of ways of getting your car back on the track the way that you want it. So all of that leads me to the AI for other racers, and this is quite an undertaking, and I knew it would be difficult, and I've never done, well, I mean, if you guys watched my first devlog, you got to see my first experience with some AI there, and those were literally just capsule colliders that moved left across the screen and then towards any target that came close to it, and then it just basically did some really basic attacking, and it was set on a timer, so I don't think you can really get AI that's simpler than that. So moving to something like this was quite ambitious and very, very math heavy. But I think I got something that is at least passable. This is actually something that I had to make a tough decision on, because I spent 3+ days working on this car AI and some of the physics around the cars, and probably 8-ish hours each day trying to figure it out. And we're nearing the end of this project. I've got a little over a week to go, and I think 2 more devlogs after this one. So I kind of had to make a decision to move on, because I still need to put items in, and I would like to make some variations on the tracks, because I only have like 3 or 4 track pieces, and that's just not enough. So I decided to leave the car AI where it is and move on, and it's functional but not great. I'm actually going to flip the footage to have the camera follow an AI car. So what you're watching now is a car that is fully controlled by my code driving around the track, and I have some other cars in there that are also controlled by AI. If you see it pass a green car that's just sitting on the side, that is the player car. That's me. I'm just not doing anything to mess with these AI racers. So while that is happening, I'll talk a bit about how I implemented this. So I basically use the same script that the player uses to control it. I just have a Boolean that is AI controlled, and that's not the best way of doing it by any means. But like I said, I'm up against some time constraints, and that was easier than breaking it out into different control scripts. So I just basically have a chunk of the update method that only happens if the car is controlled by the AI. And then it uses the same variables that the player-driven script uses, so like the same sort of inputs for acceleration and steering and everything else like that. So I just try to get some extra inputs from the car and the track and the different nodes on the track to try and be smart enough to figure out where I am, where the car should be going, and if we're stuck. The code is also very messy. We're about 500 lines just in this drive script for the car, so that's nothing to do with the camera or the track nodes or the wheels. It is literally just the driving of the car and the AI. So very messy, but it's functional, and I can still find my way around it, so it's not too bad. Before I talk specifically about the how the AI is controlled, I need to show you the track nodes. I added a lot more track nodes. In the previous video, I only had a node where the gravity was changing, and that was for the player to basically change the up position of the car, or up direction. Now I have nodes covering the entire track in very small chunks, and this serves several purposes. One, being able to reset the cars basically where they were last on the track, and 2, being able to tell the AI where to go. And each of these nodes stores the next node in the chain, so it's very easy to find what direction everything should be going. So let's dive into what the AI is actually doing. The acceleration was the easy part, and because in most cases the car just needs to be at full acceleration driving forward. So that was easy, just set the acceleration to 1. The only time that I slow down or do anything different with acceleration is I slow down when there's a turn coming up, and I just have the nodes marked if they're a turn or not. So if the next node in the chain is a turn, the car decelerates for a while, just basically slowing down so they can take the curve better, and then they accelerate back to full right after that. The other time is if they get stuck, they actually reverse. I will talk more about that in a second here. So the hard part was steering. And I went through several different iterations trying to get this to work, and did a lot of Googling to see what other people's solutions were. I'll show you the code that I'm working on right here. It basically just finds the angle between where the car is pointing and the next node. And then that gives me the angle in degrees that the car needs to turn to be basically facing the next node. And then I set that in a desired steer variable, and I clamp it to the max steer angle so that it can't oversteer. The unfortunate thing with that is that the angle is always positive, so it doesn't tell you which direction the car should be turning. So I use inverse transform direction to find out which side the node is on of the car, and then I turn that direction. I basically do that by just negating the steer angle if I need to turn left rather than right. And the car already updates when it hits a new node, and it'll set that as the node that it's going towards, and it'll drive towards the next node. I do have a little bit of padding, so once it gets to the current node's center, it will flip to driving towards the next node, so it's always just a little bit ahead. And I can show you the raycast that kind of shows what the car is aiming at right here. And this was fine, but once I started adding multiple cars, I noticed that they were all behaving the exact same way, because that's what I told them to do. They were basically driving directly down the center of the track, and if they were one right in front of the other, they basically looked like a train that were all driving linked to each other. And this is not what I wanted, so I knew I needed to add some randomness in there and do some other things to kind of make the AI controllers look different and behave a little more naturally. But that's very hard to do, because any sort of randomness I put in there in the steer angle, it really messed with it and caused the cars to spin out and crash a lot more. And I figured base level AI should at least be able to make it around the track once, and most of the time they weren't able to do that. So I walked it back and I tried to get a little more smart about it. So I basically look now, if the current node and the next node are both straight, I know that I don't have to worry too much about being exactly where the track nodes are. So I allow the car to keep their offset. I basically record the offset of the car from where the nodes are, and I allow it to drive straight, keeping that offset. I think I decreased the offset a little bit so they do gradually steer back towards being directly center with the nodes. But if they come up on a turn, those are a little more intense, so it does navigate towards the exact center. But since it's physics-based, they don't all take the turn the same, since they were going in at different angles. So they come out at different angles as well onto the next straight piece. And that way there's a new offset that they can use at that point. And then I add just a very, very minimal amount of randomness in the speed and steer random. So hopefully the cars will space themselves out a little bit more. So I put a lot of thought into how these control and trying to make them look like a human's driving them. And I'm sure you guys watching this footage have seen that that's not exactly the case. They kind of swerve in a lot of places back and forth, and they drive a little robotically. I did lerp the directions that they're going in, and that's why you get those little swerves. If I take that lerp out, they basically turn on an angle and drive directly at the node center. So I'm undecided on which one of those is better. So next, I needed to help the cars get out of bad situations, because they're going to get themselves into bad situations. The player's going to ram them, they're going to ram each other, they're going to get stuck. It just happens a lot. So I have basically a counter. If they detect that they're driving forward or trying to drive forward with their acceleration, and the car is not moving, like their speed isn't going up. So I think it's something like 2 seconds. If 2 seconds have passed and they're not getting any faster and they're trying to accelerate, they detect that they're stuck. So at that point, they will stop trying to go forward, and they reverse, turn slightly, so they should be turned back towards the track, and then they start accelerating again. And this works pretty good most of the time. Sometimes they do kind of get into a loop where they're just kind of reversing a lot. So I added another failsafe in there. If the AI car detects that a node hasn't changed for a set amount of time, it will think that it's completely stuck, and it will just flat out reset the car and place it back in the track center of the track. And this will allow it just a clean reset and start driving forward again. So, and that's just a catch-all. If things just go horribly wrong, it will just reset it in the center of the track. It will also try to orient itself if it's stuck. So if it gets flipped over onto its back, sometimes it'll be able to get out of that situation. Not all the time. Sometimes it kind of clips into the track. Not a good situation, but in the case where it clips into the track, that reset timer will catch it and it'll just spawn in the middle of the track. Okay, well that's sort of the condensed version of what this car AI is doing. This was a really tough one, and I'm going to try not to go too long here because I know this video is already super long. I know that the car physics and the way that the car controls needs a ton of work to feel really good, and I know that this AI needs a ton of work, and that work is also dependent on the way that the car behaves to work well. And I just don't have enough time to make that happen. And I know these games are just supposed to be prototypes, but I hate releasing something that's not very good. So this game will be playable. The AI should do what it's supposed to do, but it's just not going to be the best in the world. So I hope you'll forgive me for that. I truly think that I could spend an entire month just working on the controls of the car, and probably another month on top of that trying to get the AI to work well, especially once I add items in like I'm going to. So I made the decision just to leave these where they are and move on to the next thing, just because I don't have time. This is where I'm kicking myself in the butt for being a little too ambitious with this. Second game project ever, Garrett. Maybe take it a little bit easier. But I am still having fun, and for sure I have a lot more appreciation for people who make racing games now. It is not easy. And just AI in general. It's very, very interesting to try and do this. I'm probably going to put a heavier focus on AI in future games to make them better. Alright, well, I've talked your ear off. If you've made it this far, you guys are awesome. Let me know what you think of this down in the comments, and if you're excited to give it a try. We've only got a couple more videos in this series, and then we'll be moving on to the next game. So, pretty excited. Thank you guys for watching, and I will talk to you next time.